Hello everyone, welcome to the National Cultural Foundation's On Plein Air online instructional video series. I am David Alleyne and today I will be facilitating a session with you called Capturing Cathedral Lighting. We are on Cherry Tree Hill, a captivating scene that is part of the St. Nicholas Abbey estate. This area is so large that it borders both St. Andrew and St. Peter. In the past, cherry trees grew at the sides of the road leading to it, but they were replaced by mahogany trees due to the Treaty of Paris in 1763. The view from the top of the hill stretches all the way to Scotland District, a popular tourist attraction. It exists alongside the St. Nicholas Abbey Heritage Railway, constructed by local architect Larry Warren, who has owned the Abbey since 2006. In this session, I will discuss the importance of using artistic license when painting the scene. Many of the trees are edited out in the final painting, and there will be much manipulation in scenes such as these to gain a pleasing result. I will paint the darkest layers of green foliage first before painting in the tree trunks. I will then build up layers of green from dark to light. My darkest greens are made by using ultramarine blue and hooker's green to achieve the darkest greens in the painting. This painting exercise captures the many shades and streams of light through the trees. Light streaming through the canopy, thus creating what we term as the cathedral lighting effect, which is exemplified by the shadows cast on the road. After laying in the darkest greens, I'm now beginning to add light to the painting. Now this is going to be a very delicate process because it will be the act of moving between darks and medium greens and eventually getting to that point where highlights would begin to actually reflect the cathedral lighting effect. To achieve the lighter greens, I'm actually using primary yellow mixed with hooker's green. In the earlier stages of the painting, emphasis was being placed on blocking in the basic shapes, as my style or my way of painting involves looking at the patterns of nature in an abstract way and then defining them in a way that would actually lead to a realistic perspective. But as I proceed, I'm actually developing the light in the painting And I'm moving from the dark tones to varied tones of green to create that depth and ultimately that cathedral lighting effect. My work will be classified as impressionistic, and the method I'm using is a stippling type method with a fan brush. Now I'm actually using the fan brush very much like how one would use a sword. I am twisting and turning it as I develop the pattern of the leaves. In some cases, some artists would choose to actually develop the leaf pattern with the use of a flat brush and more or less simulating the effect of a leaf in every sense of the word. But the stipple effect creates an illusion of leaves. In fact, as you go further away from the painting, it looks very much like leaves. And the closer you come to the painting, you start to see the stippled effect, thus creating a kind of an illusion. Now, what I'm doing is attempting to actually start the cathedral lighting effect coming from the left to the right, as the light is streaming through the canopy. You can see the reason why I would have started off with the sky on the painting, because it reads fairly natural when you see it peeping through the vegetation. Now, one has to be very careful when they're creating the many shades of green that they do not end up in a confused state. Because as I build this painting up, I'm actually developing many different shades of green. There are medium greens, there are dark greens, there are many shades of green reflected in this process. And that is all done with the intention of achieving depth. Painting on the outdoors is such a fulfilling experience, because while you're painting, you're hearing the sounds of the birds, you're feeling the coolness of especially in a scene like Cherry Tree, where you're under the canopy of the trees, the coolness of the atmosphere is very pleasant and relaxing. Before I continue painting the foliage, I'm going to add the texture to the tree trunks so that I start to define the painting just a bit more. I'm using a palette knife, which works very well in terms of creating that additional sense of three-dimensionality and texture. The palette knife actually gives you that lovely feeling of the mahogany bark. Which brings us to the point that during the painting experience, you can actually, or should I say the finished product can actually engage the five senses. You can feel. Sometimes people have actually said concerning my paintings that they can actually hear the sounds, or they actually feel like if there's a monkey about to move through the trees. So this painting has been done in a step-by-step manner so that you're building towards a desired end. What I'm doing here at this stage of the painting is actually creating some of the highest highlights so as to create that cathedral light effect of the light just bursting through the canopy. At this point is a very subtle application of paint to create that light. At some points, it's very necessary to actually step away from the painting and observe your progress so that you have a very clear understanding of what you're doing and how to proceed from there on. Now I'm going to start to create shadows on the road, a more defined impression of the shadows on the road. And I'm going to use the palette knife simply because sometimes when you're doing a scene like this, you want to maintain a rustic effect. So the use of the palette knife actually gives you that kind of textured feeling, or that rustic feeling. Now the light is very dappled on the road, and we want to create a dappled effect. By the way, my shadows are made of ultramarine blue and cadmium red with a touch of burnt umber. For the light, I'm actually using Naples yellow, cad red, and a touch of ultramarine blue. There's a section of the road that needs to actually have lighter spots. Again, emphasizing the cathedral lighting effect. Remember, you try not to go overboard with whatever you're doing. Now we're going to add the effect of the dried fallen leaves at the side of the road, so as to create some measure of authenticity to this painting. Again, I will take a step off. Even as the painting approaches a more developed stage, stepping off becomes even more and more important, because you need to make sure that the light is being guided in the right directions. It's a very delicate part of the painting process, as we are trying to capture the light in the right way to create the desired effect. We're being very careful now to preserve this shadowy spot. Painting on location, sometimes there's certain adjustments or certain adaptations that you need to make. After assessing the painting for some time, I observed that my shadows were actually running too dark, and that probably would have resulted out of painting under the direct sunlight. So you kind of misjudge your tones a bit. So I'm now going to apply a lighter tone to the shadows. Having adjusted the shadows necessitates adjusting the splashes of light. Bearing in mind that we are portraying cathedral lighting, so the light is going to be quite sharp in some areas. We're also going to try to bump up the light on the tree trunk just a bit. Remember, you're using the blade, the edge of the blade of the palette knife. You're not loading the palette knife with paint. Now, the interesting thing with this scene, there are some tree trunks in the background that actually have quite a bit of light flickering on them. And we just want to include those as we bring this demonstration to a close. But we don't want to overdo it, which is very easy to do. Thank you, folks, for joining me for this episode of Capturing Cathedral Lighting in the Landscape. I hope it motivates you to pick up paints and brushes and get out there and create wherever you are, or you can visit us in beautiful Barbados.